Welcome to the Blam Blam Trucker podcast, your home for positive geekdom from Beas and Buse. This is one of our lost episodes from when we had a bit more defined beards, and before our production value raised up just a little bit. On this episode, we talk about creating a sci-fi world that we feel would be enjoyable to play around in. I hope you enjoy our past selves.
The people we've entrusted, like we had any say in it, the people who have bought the franchises Buse and I grew up loving, aren't writing the kind of stories we love, which is fine. It's theirs. They bought it. They paid for it. I have no problem with them doing what they want with it. But I'm not going to buy it. I'm not interested in it. But I still have a desire, an outlet for not only creativity, but for epic stories and epic storytelling. And that is what we're doing tonight. So a couple of episodes back, we had talked about how to make your own universe. At least we had started mentioning it. And I came up with a list of some questions. It's entitled Brainstorming Questions about the background, about the world building for our own sci-fi universe. Because Star Trek, as much as I love Deep Space Nine, and I love Deep Space Nine, it's not this. Again, the stories aren't the ones I want to watch. That's it. They're telling stories for a different audience. They don't want me as part of their audience anymore. So I'm going to make up my own stories. I've been making up stories my whole life for RPGs and comic books and all sorts of stuff and books. And I've got like 5 novels I haven't finished writing yet. So
I got about 10
can
I
make
haven't
up a
started.
story. What?
I said I got about 10 I haven't started.
There you go. So, yeah, we're gonna walk through these questions, and I don't know how much you've looked them over. I know you've seen them before.
Yep.
Each one of these, and I don't know if you came up with your own list of questions, or we're just going into this. I don't expect you to. I'm content. You're editing.
Oh, yeah. I need to be fired. But go ahead.
It's my job to come up with a topic every week for us to talk about. So this should last us quite a while. Okay, so jumping right into it. So Star Wars isn't anything I want to buy right now. They're not putting out the stories I like, and that's, again, they're chasing a different audience. Good luck to them. I hope they find it, but I'm not it. And because of that, we thought a space fantasy story would be a good one to tell, and so we came up with how to do world building, and maybe, if everything goes right and we like it, we'll actually write the story. And you guys start watching and commenting like, we can't wait for chapter 1! But the idea here isn't to come up with one storyline, it's to come up with the world, the whole background, not necessarily the history of the world yet, but how the world works. That's the first step of world building. Until you know how the world works, you can't figure out how that would change or impact history. So we are talking on electronic communications over the internet. We're not in the same state right now, I don't think.
Well, confusion, but yeah.
Well, yes, that. So all of this technology goes back to the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution started with the steam engine more than any other invention. Just being able to make a machine that rotates without an animal pushing it, or without bestial power or muscle power. And the steam engine was first invented before Christ. We're talking BC time periods. But it was never energy efficient until the 1600s England, 1800s England. It wasn't that long ago from the length of the human race. And the whole reason why it got invented, the only reason it got invented, was because of coal. You guys, some of you might be familiar with the story. Are you familiar with this story, Buse?
At one point I may have been.
Okay, I'll take that as a maybe.
I'm not quite the history buff you are.
So whenever I see in a fantasy setting or a medieval setting, like Avatar, for instance, where they got steam engines from, or where they have steam engines and they don't have an explanation for why, like it's some kind of natural progression, it's automatically a turnoff. Go ahead.
He means The Last Airbender, not James Cameron. Just saying.
Oh yeah, yeah. Avatar: The Last
I
Airbender.
mean, we do.
Not the blue people.
We are talking about sci-fi, so.
That's fair. I didn't see the second one. Are there steam engines in the second one?
We're trying to be
The blue people.
We're trying to be positive, and I was not able to. Yeah, I was not able to get through much of it.
So anyway, the steam engine was invented because of coal mines. The English needed coal to heat their homes because they ran out of forest they wanted to cut down. It was long before either one of us was born, and or our grandparents for that matter. And so what they did is they had plenty of coal, so they started mining coal. And it got to the point they were mining down so far that water was getting into the mines and stopping them from able to go any deeper. So they needed to get that water out. So they said that somebody invented a pumping system based off a steam engine. And steam engines were not everywhere in the world. They were a very rare thing at the time. And the reason why is because they're not efficient at all. So you need a lot of coal. And what I mean by not efficient is whatever a steam engine could do, a horse could do better, or an ox, or probably a donkey. Muscle power just beat out mechanical power. And that was the way of it until the steam engine in the coal mines. And it was used to pump because you can't get the horse down there to drag the water out, even though it would cost less money to have the horse do it. We're talking going down vertical shafts and stuff. It's just, it wasn't cost effective to send down the animal. And because it was a coal mine, they had a lot of excess coal. So it didn't matter that it was less efficient because they could waste that money. And all in all, for the total progress of the joint venture, or joint is the wrong word, but for the total progress of the venture, it was more efficient to just use a steam engine to pump out the water, even though the steam engine itself was nowhere near as effective as a horse would be in creating that same amount of work for less money. So, because they were doing that in one mine, other mines that the same guy owned started using steam engines, and people looking at the steam engine were like, I bet I could work on this and fix it. And because they did that, they made it more and more efficient. And because England has been a textile generating country since before 1066, wool has been a major English export for most of its national history. The Vikings used to go there to get wool. And because of that, they looked at now taking the now efficient, because after people were tinkering on it, it got more and more efficient. So they took it and looked at that and bringing it over to looms, giant looms that they were using to make fabric and textiles. And in doing so, this is pretty cool, the steam engine got refined to the point where they started looking at using it for locomotion, but it was still so inefficient compared to modern day internal combustion gasoline engines and diesel engines that they would only use it for big projects like trains. But over the years, it became more and more efficient. But knowing that about how our world works, that no one in their right mind would ever use a steam engine instead of a horse, because for their initial creations, they're just not worth it. So that's a real neat bit of history. And look at the impact it's had on our world, on real life. So you want to be, when you're thinking about these things as a sci-fi writer or a speculative fiction writer, you're not only looking at the technology you want to play with, but how that would impact. Where did it come from? How did that grow? And by doing that, it leads into your history of the world. So that's why, using a great example not a lot of people know about, that's why it's good to get all the world building done before you just jump into the world. So, do you have the document I sent you up?
I do. And with good world building, I mean, you can have a multitude of stories. I mean, going back to Star Trek, even. With Star Trek, we have stories across multiple different times, although most of it's in the Next Generation area, or now more in original series, but we can have
That's what people bought.
Yeah.
You're going to tell stories people want to read. That's why you tell them.
And over multiple periods of time. But one of the nice things about Star Trek, and some people may disagree here and there, but like with what Bees was saying, heck, even in terms of watching these shows, to some degree, we're able to see how even technology has moved or evolved over time, even just from original series to Next Generation. If you're a Roddenberry purist.
And the impact of the Ferengi.
Yes.
So the Ferengi were selling the Federation synthahol before the Federation knew about the Ferengi.
That came up in Deep Space Nine?
It's one of those little itty-bitty trivia facts that people generally don't know about Star Trek, but Ferengis created synthahol. And by the time the Next Generation starts, they already have synthahol all over the Federation, but especially in Starfleet. But I don't know why you'd ever want to drink it.
I believe that was a line from a first season episode.
That probably is true. So it tastes like alcohol, but it's not. And so the Ferengi actually invented synthahol. That comes up in, I want to say TNG, The Next Generation, but it might have been in Deep Space Nine. I'm not a Trekkie. I don't know. But you're not going to believe it by talking to me or listening to me. But it's true. Trek is just something I'm interested in, not something I'm a giant fan of to begin with. Though I do love Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
But they meet the Ferengi and make first contact with the Ferengi in, is it the first episode of The Next Generation? It's in the first season.
Yeah, it's in the first season, but it is, I forgot the name of the episode, but it is the one where they're both searching for evidence of an ancient civilization, and also
he's invented holodeck technology.
And also, fun fact, Armin Shimmerman is one of the first Ferengi we see, even before he played Quark.
Yes, he was. So anyway, if you've got a really well-developed world, then these little things that people take joy in knowing about that world, well, look how happy we are knowing this stuff. We love them correcting and going back and forth on it. You're creating something people will love, I think.
Yeah.
And space fantasy is something that's very lacking, in my opinion, though I hear okay things about Rebel Moon.
Haven't watched it yet. Movie. I plan on it.
Is it even out yet?
I have to check.
I don't think it is.
Yeah. But for me, I like some of Zack Snyder's stuff. I don't like some other stuff. But I say like myself, like I'm some important thing to strive to. But Zack Snyder has like great ideas and great worlds, even if I don't always like how they play out. And that's part of the problem. He also is someone who needs more time to fully play out his ideas, which, unfortunately, the moment you have studio involvement causes things to be worse because it's hard to truncate what he does into smaller packages. However, for sake of people going to see the movie, it is hard for people to go see a 4.5 hour long movie. Even us geeks sometimes.
He's also a postmodern deconstructionist, and it comes out quite often in his work. That's not a philosophy I subscribe to, but I'm aware of it and can recognize it, and it's very evident in the Superman movies.
I just mainly want to see Rebel Moon because it is based off of his idea for what he was going to do if he had gotten a Star Wars movie, but they did not want to give him. So, feel free to correct me in the comments, but from articles I read, wanted to do a Star Wars movie, but didn't want to have it be anywhere near Skywalker Saga. Wanted to be on the edge of the galaxy, far away, not involving the Empire, not involving the Republic. Have it, I think he wanted to be like 5,000 years later or something like that, and be its own self-contained story that just happens to take place in a galaxy far, far away. I don't know if 5,000 years
Not,
later would count as a long time ago, but
I don't, I don't know if it just happened, but he wanted to play in the universe without being mired down in their story.
yeah,
He, not to change, well, probably to change some stuff because it's Snyder, but within the rules of that world, of the world that they built, hey, world building, he wanted to tell a story. And I can appreciate that. There's some really great Star Wars stories that weren't about Luke. Or look at the entire X-Wing saga,
mm-hmm.
which we've said earlier is one of our favorite series that they ever put out.
and
So,
and even if you have some issues with it and such, I mean, heck, even look at just the first season of The Mandalorian at the very least. Yes, we have somewhat Jedi involved with Grogu slash a child, but it's its own self-contained story. It's a completely new character who people immediately latched onto. Stories were in general well done, and it was fairly episodic. There was I want to say while there was kind of an overarching story, it was kind of like X-Files. I feel like the first season, the best thing I can compare it to is X-Files. With
television
X-Files,
really needs to get back to episodic storytelling.
what was that?
Television really needs to get back to episodic storytelling.
Yeah, one fun thing about episodic storytelling is you don't need to binge watch. And also,
Nope.
it's better if you don't. I was reading an article the other day, and actually it might have been today, I should have been working. But I was reading an article, and I was looking at some comments underneath, and people were talking about, one of their favorite sci-fi shows. But it's hard for them to watch now because it was not a show that was meant to be binge watched. It was something that was meant to be watched an episode at a time with a week or two in between. You mulled it over.
So I always think of the British television show Green Wing, which is about a hospital, and it's really, really hard to watch binge style. I feel the same way. We've talked about it because the jokes are the same, the characters are the same. They're wacky and they're crazy, but they're the same kind of wacky and crazy. And if you get it once a week or even once a day, you get a little bit of a break. But when you just sit and watch it episode after episode, yes, you notice new thing. You notice continuity you wouldn't have noticed before. But it's also, you get tired of those characters. That's what happened to me with How I Met Your Mother.
Mm. Oh, because you were binging it, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those characters are evil.
Yes. Well, I mean, heck, even... And I'm almost on the last season, but I really like Burn Notice. But
Oh, yeah.
it gets hard. After 2 to 3 episodes at a time, I'm just done. And it's not like I don't
Yeah.
want to watch the show again. I just don't want to watch the show anymore tonight.
Yeah. Especially with their ongoing story. But we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
I was actually part of the inspiration for that role-playing game that
Yes.
we're running, is to do more episodic stories. Just quick adventure, knock it out. Quick adventure, knock it out. So, back to World Biz. So, that's our plan. We're making our own universe here. You guys are witnesses to the start of it. We have not talked about it much, just the idea. I did come up with this list of questions, or topics, really. And hopefully Buse has at least read it.
Yeah, I think we kind of started to go through it and went off topic in a previous episode. And if that's the case, maybe I'll truncate the 2 episodes together once I find the edit.
We haven't gone into any detail on it. We just started talking about the idea because we came up with it on air.
Okay.
At least that's That is my recollection, Senator. That is my recollection. So, how do you want to do it? First off, did anything pop out at you while you're reading it? Is there one thing in particular you really want to hit first, or should we just start at the top and go through?
Um, I'm going to be honest. I've read through all of it, and the stuff that interests me most is the first and fourth topics. Uh, Outside of that, I'm good with any order. Actually, I'm good
Well,
with any
let's.
order regardless. But yes, so the
I expect the first topic will actually take us through the rest of the night. We've got about an hour and a half left,
I
um,
understand.
and they're all doozies. Like getting into some of the technical details. Get out your geek cards, boys and girls. We're going to be checking to allow you for admission in the door. That's not even remotely true. If you don't have a geek card, you're more than welcome here, but you're probably not going to want to stay on some of these. However, let's get started. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts. So the first topic is faster than light travel, FTL. How does it work?
I mean, I would just kind of move it down to travel because there are stories and such that don't have faster than light travel that are great sci-fi and actually like take place in like a wider galaxy or whatever. Think of
Firefly.
Firefly. I was actually going to say think of Alien or the Alien series.
There you go.
They have no faster than light. Firefly at least had some sort of like thruster burner stuff to go really fast.
I
But
was very surprised in later episodes or when Josh Whedon was talking. Was it Josh Whedon?
yep, Firefly
Right.
was Joss Whedon.
When he was talking about it, and he said it all happened in one solar system.
Yeah, that made no sense.
It, if all the planets got terraformed, there's enough planets in our solar system to account for that. If they did all the moons,
Hmm.
so you've got your terrestrial planets, which are closer to the sun, and then you have the moons around like Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune. If they could terraform them all, yeah, in Uranus. Don't forget about Uranus.
The only problem with that is you can terraform and everything, but they all seem to have somewhat normal day-night cycles, which if you know what I mean, like
The more you get into Firefly, the worse the world building is.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I love Firefly. The stories were wonderful and human and draw you in, and it's not. They didn't get bogged down in the geekitude that we're about to get bogged down in.
Yep.
And you're right. It does. You don't. For if you're just telling a sci-fi story, you don't need faster than light travel. But we're not just telling a sci-fi story. We're creating a space fantasy world in the vein of Star Wars and Star Trek. And what other? There's. I can think of individual stories, but
Well, you see,
not.
like
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, that's why, like, as you all have probably begun to come to learn and will continue to come to learn, I don't mean to play the contrarian, but I often do.
You're good at it.
But I'm like thinking of even stuff like the Riddick universe and, like I said, Alien and stuff like that. They exist, and
Riddick's got a universe now.
it's got four movies, five if you count the cartoon.
Four? I only know of two.
Pitch
Wow, I'm out of touch.
Pitch Black, that was the first movie.
Yeah,
Chronicles of Riddick.
that's the two I know of.
Dark Fury was a cartoon that took place between Pitch Black and Chronicles of Riddick. Came out of roughly the same time as Chronicles of Riddick. There was also
Vaguely sounds familiar.
another one called Riddick, just Riddick. That was the one. That one had Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar Galactica fame. And then, you know what? A new one is being produced, so it hasn't come out yet. So we have got four so far.
Fair enough.
I loved Pitch Black the first time I saw it. It was, I think, the first Vin Diesel movie I ever saw, and it was great.
Fair enough.
But similar to Aliens, when you travel, you're put into a hypersleep. So time passes, it takes a long time to travel, except I think the people from Chronicles of Riddick, they've got like some sort of faster than light or whatever, but regular humans initially, when they travel long distances, you go into hypersleep. So you don't age as much, or you're sleeping or whatever during that time, but people age around you, which is kind of made Alien fun. But anyways, proceed.
That goes back to E equals MC squared and speed of light and relativistic travel,
Yep.
which you pretty much have to ignore to do fast and light travel. All right, so if we're doing a world with multiple solar systems, you need faster than light travel for the most part.
Yes.
For it to be the kind of world that Star Trek and Star Wars was. And did Stargate do? I didn't watch a lot of Stargate.
Well, I mean, if you just watch the movie, which I just did, I'm actually planning on watching the series because I just rewatched the movie.
Hey, what's that on right now?
YouTube Free is what I watched it on.
Really?
Yes.
The series or the movie?
The movie.
Oh, I watched that. That movie was good.
The series.
Never got into the series.
The series, I believe, is on Amazon Prime right now. From my stuff, the original series, the Atlantis and Universe and all those other ones. I think one other of them is on Amazon, but the others I will have to find alternate means if I decide to watch them.
Fair enough.
But Battlestar Galactica, it kind of had a faster than light travel. At least the new
That's true, yeah.
The new Battlestar Galactica. The old one, I had a hard time watching. I'll be honest. I tried.
Wagon train in space.
I guess that makes sense. And I couldn't get into Wagon Train as a kid either, so it makes sense that as an adult. So I loved Ronald Moore's Battlestar Galactica. When I went back to try to watch the original, because I'm like, oh, I'm a geek. Geeks love Battlestar Galactica. It hurt. It hurt a lot. For me, it was just hard to process. But I'll admit, as much as I love Star Trek original series, I actually have a hard time watching episodes of that I've never seen. Yeah. The lens of nostalgia is a powerful thing. I can watch Trouble with Tribbles every day for the rest of my life. That's an exaggeration. But some of those other episodes, I have to push through because I don't have memories of them. So therefore, my brain is like, what are you watching?
And some of them are just bad.
Well, there's that.
Not to rank on Star Trek the original series because it was amazingly innovative, and Gene Solo is a hero for creating that. Yes, Gene Solo. I said the right name.
Oh, he changed his name, or someone else helped him?
Gene Solo is the producer who greenlit it and made sure it actually worked.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Gene Roddenberry did come up with Star Trek, but out of all the ideas he pitched to Solo, that was the one that... Did you know Han Solo is actually named in honor of Gene Solo?
I didn't, but I kind of wondered about that the second you said the name.
Yeah. So it's spelled a lot different. But that was... George Lucas told him that was a bit of a tribute. There's a lot of tributes to Star Wars. So Gene Solo actually does a talk on YouTube that is fantastic. It goes for an hour. It's him and one of the other producers. And they just talk about all the stuff that happened behind the scenes and everything from their perspective. And it was very enlightening. Anyway. But without him... So it was produced at Desilu Studios, and Lucy did not get Star Trek. She was ready to cancel it the second time she heard about it. First time it was really pitched to her, because she had just heard the name Star Trek. Lucy Arnaz actually thought that Star Trek was what do you call that? Bob Hope does them. You go and you entertain the troops. Anyway, so she thought it was a World War II series about going and entertaining the troops in the South Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it was called Star Trek, because they were trekking around to entertain the stars.
Okay.
Because the sci-fi show had never been done before, which is, and Gene Solo's the one who had to explain it to her, a very junior producer comparatively to the head of the studio. And yeah. Anyway, enough of it. Are we done with? Did I clear up all the tangents we went on? Did we clear up all the tangents we went on? Are we ready to talk about fast and light travel?
I mean, there's always more tangents, but I think so.
If we missed anything, leave it in the comments, and we'll hit it next time. Well, probably not, because who knows when this will get posted, but we should do an episode of comments and responding to comments and answers and things we left unsaid. Oh, I wanted you to finish this one thing you started talking about. You never did, Bees. I'm so disappointed in you, Bees. Why not, Bees? Why not? So I came up with 1, 2, 3, 4 different types. Four different types of fast and light travel. These are the 4 that I know the best. And I'm going to go through them. There's actually a 5th one now that I'm thinking about it, but that's okay. It's kind of a combination of 2 of these. Actually, no, anyway, let me go through them. The first is hyperspace, like in Star Wars, where to get around the restriction of speed of light. So the reason why you can't travel at the speed of light is because if you accelerate mass to the speed of light, it turns into electromagnetic energy. That's literally what E equals mc squared is saying. If you accelerate mass, so mass times the speed of light, you accelerate mass to the speed of light, you will turn that mass directly into electromagnetic energy, E. Light, basically. Light is a form of electromagnetic energy. It's the one we're most common with because we see things with our eyes in the visual spectrum. So to get around that, you have to find a way to accelerate faster than the speed of light without actually going faster than the speed of light. So relative to your position in space, you need to find a way to move faster than light would move and not kill yourself by turning into pure energy. Because when you disintegrate someone and you turn them into pure energy, or you toss them in a nuclear reactor and turn them into pure energy, or they get caught in an atomic bomb, they become pure energy, or you drop them in a sun or whatever, turns out it kills you. And you generally don't want to die. That seems to be the opposite of staying alive, and generally you want to do that. So to be able to cross these vast distances, you need to find a way to go faster than the speed of light without actually turning into energy and disintegrating yourself. So the way Star Wars handles it, it's called hyperspace. You're in this dimension, and you leave this dimension for a second, and you're still moving, and you continue on with your velocity or inertia or whatever in this alternate dimension, this sub-dimension, the hyperspace dimension. And then when you come back into the reality, seconds later, you've effectively teleported yourself a vast distance. That's how hyperspace theoretically works in Star Wars, from the mind of George Lucas. And that is how hyperspace generally works when somebody talks about hyperspeed, because it got really, really popular with Star Wars, and a lot of block fantasy, which is what we're trying to make here, doesn't bother get into the nitty-gritty details, so they just say, oh, he went faster than the speed of light, he traveled at hyperspeed. That's all there is to it. Spaceballs doesn't, but Spaceballs is a parody. Do you want to cover one of these? Warp, maybe?
Sure. So we got jump drives following instant travel warp paths, i.e., now this can be done in different ways. Like, for example, like it could be something that's stationary, like in some stuff you have like what they call jump gates. Yes, Stargate does it. Babylon 5 did it with jump gates, similar to actually Stargate, but just for ships. And you travel along until you exit. but yeah, you're pretty much, and in some of the cases, you actually still might be traveling through an alternate dimension as you're doing it, but you're you're somehow being accelerated from point to point at a faster speed, whether that be instantaneous, almost like a teleportation, or whether that take a specific period of time. You're being accelerated, moving through, ending up at a final point. But it's not it, for lack of a way of putting it. It's more outside of you, I guess, as opposed to it's out. It's kind of outside of your ship as opposed to being generated by something within your ship, like hyperspace is, or it's actually they seem pretty
So
similar.
with jump drives or jump points,
Mhm.
there's designated points where you go from one point A to point B, usually instantaneously, but like you said, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. Um, Stargate's a great example. Guardians of the Galaxies and the entire MCU is a good
Yep.
example. Because if you watch Guardians of the Galaxy 2, they really get into it trying to get to planet Ego. Star-Lord's dad there. They do a million jumps at once there. It was less than a million, but whatever. And their faces are kind of melting while they're doing it because they're doing too many jumps at once. So that's how a jump drive works. Sometimes it is the ship. Often, in a lot of the sci-fi I read where they use this, it's not like a Stargate. It's a point, a single point in space. And if you activate your drive at that point, it will take you to the other point.
It's pretty much like invisible wormholes that you use your drive to open up.
Yeah. And the closest thing we have in real science is black holes. Maybe. We don't know how black holes work. We know almost nothing about them. Don't really know exactly what they are. But that has been theorized that a black hole could take, if you could survive going through one, would take you from one point to another. But it is a tiny singularity, and you jump from one point to another. Guardians of the Galaxy is a great example. For people who aren't familiar with a lot of sci-fi novels or video games, I figured you were going to cover warp, being the bigger Trekkie here. So,
I mean, you know far more about Trek than I do. I just enjoy it.
You have such a passion for it.
I enjoy it.
So, I like knowing things, people. I do. I enjoy understanding how things work. That is a drive for me. So I tend to know a lot about a lot of stuff. That's just part of who I am. Hi, I'm Beas. Warp speed. So warp works by you actually warp reality around you. So there is an electromagnetic gravitational field, we've theorized. And we have a great deal of evidence to support this, though I don't think in science we truly understand how it works. But there's at least definitely an electromagnetic field that permeates the entire known universe. Well, yeah. And if that electromagnetic gravitational field is what is keeping you in place in the universe, if you could find a way to change that field, you can warp space-time itself, which would allow you to move from place to place faster than the speed of light without actually going to the speed of light. You are changing the nature of the space-time around your ship. So you are warping space, which I can get into a lot more detail than that, but that is the basics of warp drive. You are warping your, like space is normally like this. I don't have a cloth with me right now, but the idea for space-time is if it's like a sheet, like this, and you want it to get from point A to point B, when you warp space, you bring point A to point B instead of moving the ship. You actually warp space to move it closer together just for an instant, and that allows you to move faster. There you go. Yes. This is actually based on some of Einstein's theories and other people's theories. It is the closest to real science of anything we've talked about so far, for faster than light travel.
Hence the warp bubble in Star Trek to keep you safe while you travel that way.
Yes, because the space around the ship is different than this normal space. All right. You want to handle boom tubes or no?
No, because
You want to talk more about warp? I don't want to cut you off.
Oh no, it's fine. I actually always thought boom tubes were more close to jump drive, so you go for it. You're more the comics expert here.
So the reason why, so boom tubes come from DC Comics. It is long distance teleportation. It is reality warping. It is everything else we've talked about. Multidimensional travel. A boom tube in DC can take you anywhere. If you saw the Justice League movie, then what's his butt there? The guy from Apocalypse, Steppenwolf. He used a boom tube to get to Earth. And the difference between a boom tube and a jump drive is that boom tubes can be opened anywhere. They just open up in one place and they're not set. You are able to actually localize teleportation in a small area. You can send a person through, you can send a ship through if you have enough power. So yeah. Transformers use space bridges, which are similar more to jump drives.
Yes, pretty much almost exactly, in my opinion, almost exactly like Babylon 5 if you're a Babylon 5 fan. And with the new movie that came out for Babylon 5, we might have more.
And they also have a hyperspace of some kind. They just call it hyperspeed.
Mm-hmm.
So in Transformers, you would actually get to the new planet and set up a space bridge there that connects back to a space bridge jump point on Cybertron.
So pretty much, you move fast. You move at a faster than light or at a very fast rate to get there. But once you get there and you build it, you have instantaneous transport.
Exactly. And I use that a lot in my Transformers. I hate to call it fan fiction. Fan fiction gets such a bad rap. But my own personal dalliances into the Transformers universe. There's no one there's no one continuity in Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
But each continuity tries to keep within itself, and they actually deal with a lot of great sci-fi tropes and ideas, and it's fun to play. It's fun to play there. Maybe one of these days I'll share some of it with you guys. Did you ever get around to reading any of those short stories I sent you for the Transformers?
I want to say I read.
That to know.
Oh no, I want to say I read a couple some years back. Or is this different?
With Grunt, the character Grunt.
You've talked to me about him, so I don't know what. But I swear I did read some of your stuff from a while back, or we just sat up one night and talked about it till 3 a.m.
Probably 4.
By the way, Beas and I, as you can guess, are friends and have been friends for over 2 decades at this point.
Since 1998.
Oh wow, 25 years. It's our 25th anniversary, roughly, because we met in college 25 years ago.
Oh yeah.
So, our discussions are famous for going into the wee hours of the night, where we talk about many, many things, and my wife will leave us be because we will stay up until 3 a.m. just talking.
She's usually good till midnight.
Yeah. But we have many conversations where afterwards we'll be like, this sounds familiar. Have we had this conversation before? I think we've had this conversation before. But we were both half asleep when we did it. But also, one more tangent. I can listen to Bees talk and explain something in its entirety to the point I don't really need to read it. But in general, I still like reading it anyway. One of my favorite book series. He literally went through every single book in the original trilogy series of it. We talked for probably 3 to 5 hours straight. And I still read the books, and they're still some of my favorites. And you know exactly what books those are.
No, I'm not going to read that piece. Why would I? Why would I read? I'm not interested. It doesn't sound that good. All right, because I have theories about how this works. That was Gilded Chain there, Dave Duncan.
Yep, the King's Blade series. Yep, and
There you
now
go.
Dave Duncan was, rest in peace, one of my favorite authors. And if I could get my hands on the last two King's Blade series books,
Oh, come on, just drop $100 a piece.
well, one of them I kind of have. I just have to borrow off someone's Amazon account because they did buy it for me before it was no longer available. The other one I probably have to get the Audible of. Anyways, fascinating tangent. Let's move on.
All right, so we need to talk about how we want travel to work. Because we've covered the main ways of travel, and the only other thing I was thinking of was hyperspace cannons, which are basically like, I think they're kind of like jump drives or jump points where
Mm-hmm.
but they're not. They're basically it's a circle that you go through in space, and as you go through it, the circle launches you into hyperspace. So they set up the trajectory for you, and hopefully they get it right. But it's not like a jump point where there are 2 points that are connected.
Okay, that sounds more like Babylon 5.
Okay,
I'm just
I haven't watched a lot of Babylon 5,
yeah.
but go on.
Well, no, I was just saying because with Babylon 5, one of the things is once you go through the gate, you have to stay on course. You can go off, but if you do, I forgot exactly what they call it, but you're pretty much lost. If you go off course when you're in there, and you can be attacked and stuff when you're in there, and sometimes people have tried to save themselves while they're being attacked by going off to the right, going off to the left, whatever, but then they're just forever lost and they can't find their way back again.
Yeah, you got to hit your target, or you won't be at a place that has another jump cannon
Yeah, so because yeah, you have to
or
be
hyperspace cannon.
because you have to be slowed down to be pulled out of it, or you have to. Since we're talking about more hyperspace type thing, you have to have a portal of some sort to come out of hyperspace back into real space.
Yes, if it's hyperspace, even if it's just like a warp cannon that would send you out from point A, hopefully to point B, if it aims you like being shot out of a cannon,
Mm-hmm.
then you would eventually revert to real space out of your warped space, and you would be no way to get to re-achieve faster than light travel. So, do you have any opinions on how you like our world to be built?
In all honesty, I think that for the sake of opening up more stories, as silly as it sounds, I like the whole jump point or like kind of jump point itself, or like kind of like or even possibly the combined transformer system, but have the regular faster than light travel be way too expensive, which is why you build these jump points or space bridges or whatever you want to
Or
call it,
just slow?
or slow, or a combination of the whole. Yeah, you've got the technology to put people in sleep, so when they finally get to the point, then they build it. Then you can, but whichever. I like the jump points because it opens it up. Because hey, if you think about it, like think about like in many of these worlds, I use worlds loosely because I mean the universe you're creating, the world building we're talking about. You have frontier type places, like in Star Wars, you have the Rim in uh, Firefly. I forget what they call the outer territories or whatever, but you always have these places that are far away from the center, and it's always nice to do and I like those types of stories better, and I feel in general a lot of people do because they tend to end up getting fairly popular. The nice thing about it is you can set up a whole universe or whatever, and you can have a story just because the colony is set up, but the portal breaks. There's no way to
You
come back.
want to You want to do portals or natural jump points? Because I really like natural jump points.
I prefer portals. I'm
Like Stargate style portals or Space Bridge style portals.
Yeah, because I think they open up more. Because also explore. It also means, in my opinion, uh, which is all of this is just our own opinions, obviously.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, it also makes exploration all the more important because you have to actually go there, build a point, set up whatever trajectories from point A to point B. Granted, I know in Star Wars you have to, at least in the expanded universe, you had to do something similar because traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crofts. You have to actually know where the worlds are, where they're going to be in rotation, or else you can get pulled out, or you can get destroyed or whatever. Which is why as you expand and travel to like more of the outer rim or the I forgot the area, or wild space. Like wild space is dangerous because of various stars, and I guess it's more dense or whatever. But anything like that, I like jump points because I personally think it opens up more, especially in those rim areas where you are very dependent upon technology, and if technology fails you, it creates stories. Because that's just how my mind works with stories.
You're also going to see with that, wherever there is a jump point, and I think we should make them rare. I think hyperspace or warp or whatever. It just so remember our buddy. Let's call him Mikey.
Mm-hmm.
Mikey and Spiky. Mikey
Mm-hmm.
Spiky. Yeah. I don't want to just name him on the internet here and have people trying to find the guy. Um, we were building something 20 years ago, and I came up with an idea for FTL. Well, if that was the acronym for the drive, faster than light, you'd call it fatal, right? What
Mm-hmm.
word? I may have mentioned this to you, but whatever our fatal drive is, our FTL drive is, it should definitely be slower than the jump points. So what you'll end up having is like, I think a good example would be the railroad in the American West. Or if you want to go back to the age of navigation, ports on colonies on various continents, because that colony becomes a major center of um, civilization. And then the other worlds around that, because the traffic back and forth through that jump point is going to be immense, you'll have a big city there, and then around it you'll have, or a big planet there, and then around it you'll have all these little planets in other solar systems that you have to fatal to, you have to FTL to those. So it would give kind of a spur and bar kind of look to the
Mm-hmm.
various civilizations, because to some degree we want a table. We don't want to make a decision on the FTL until we actually get into the socio-political situation, because it's going to have the big one of the biggest impacts on that. But we both like the whole jump drive idea, or jump point idea, Stargate kind of, well, whatever term you want to use.
Well, I mean,
Artificial wormhole.
they're the same but different, but yeah.
Now here's a question for you.
Uh-huh.
You want it to be a space Stargate or an on-land Stargate, like in Transformers' space bridges?
Oh, I didn't realize space bridges and transformers were always on the ground.
Mostly on the ground. The exception and is Transformers Prime that I know of. I didn't watch every Transformers series, but space bridges are normally on the ground, and you just walk from one planet to another.
Cool.
You can walk from one side of the galaxy to another if you set it up right.
That's interesting, because that creates.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Because that also creates a whole different thing. That actually means that if you were to, I know we're not into the socio-political and stuff like that, but if we,
it's time to start talking about these things in passing so that when we do focus on it, we have some ideas already.
Well,
so, into the socio-political thing.
Because it would make warfare different. You would defend, like, if you were worried about, let's say your jump point goes to a place that is not as reputable or is more likely to be taken over by bad actors in some way, shape, or form. You have to protect there.
Do you mean bad actors?
But, we talked about the whole, bar and spoke thing. If you are, let's say, you're the central planet in that area, you're the one who controls that main jump point or jump gate, but if that is, let's say, on the ground, space bridge, you then need to have some sort of planetary defense force, mainly because you have to worry somewhat about rebellion, because other planets will still want what you have. And even if they are territories, all it takes is a very charismatic leader from one of those territories to say, you aren't sharing enough. We all... But yeah, so, but that's... I'm thinking in terms of, like, galaxy, whatever, wars, because and the nice thing about it being on the ground is it makes planetary invasion forces almost, training individual soldiers almost becomes as or more important than training your fighter pilots, because your fighter pilots, if you can't get them through that gate, it's difficult. If you can't get them through that gate, they're traveling who knows how long along that, along hyperspace to get there. Whereas you can send an army through quickly if you control one side. So it provides different types of warfare. In fact, I'm sure that if we did something like that, and if we did have to decide how wars were fought, it would create new stories and possibly even having to come up with what type of tactics would be popular in those cases.
And that's what I want to talk about, because if we use this system, then, all right, I'm just going to use Star Trek now.
Yep.
I'm just going to jump right into Star Trek. I'm not saying we have the same factions as Star Trek. I'm not stealing from Star Trek, but I'm just going to use their fact. Screw Star Trek. I'm going to use real life stuff. Mm-hmm. So, because it's a different kind of travel, Stargate and Fatal, the Stargate allows you, the space bridge, we'll call them space bridge because they're on the planet. Mm-hmm. So space bridges makes insurrections from your own society more dangerous, or more a very different concern than being attacked than America if it has its own Stargate system. Mm-hmm. Or say Mexico, to attack America, they have to travel across those distances at fatal speeds. Because all I have to do to stop the Americans from attacking the Mexicans, or the Mexicans from attacking the Americans, is turn off my space bridge.
Yep.
So as long as I control one side, I can send in another army. I can keep sending armies, as many as I have to send. But that also means that when you get to another planet, securing the space bridges is going... If a faction fight happens, if England attacks France or whatever, or vice versa, France attacks England, they have to get there, and then they have to take the space bridges, because they can whistle up reinforcements faster than you can bring another fleet in. Mm-hmm. So let's say it takes a week. It's relatively fast fatal speeds, so it takes a week to fatal there, and it only takes an hour to organize the army and send it in. Less than an hour. So their reinforcements are going to be key. And let's say the portal is big enough to definitely get fighters through. even if you have to put them on a cart, or like our own jets have wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So a fighter jet, if it's roughly the same size as one of our modern day F-15s or F-35s or whatever, F-22 Interceptor. If you are able to just put them on their landing gear and just drive them through the portal, you can restock your army, and you can do it on the other side of the planet. It changes the whole dynamic of warfare, and it leads to definitely two versions of warfare. And that's only faction to faction fight. What if you're dealing with pirates? How does piracy work? We haven't even talked about energy shields or weapons or anything like that. This is just how does travel impact combat?
Yep. Because
Do you have
realistically,
any...
it doesn't matter what type of weapons you have. I mean, weapons could be a game changer, but whether you're talking blasters or
is going to
bullets,
be part of it no matter what.
right? Whether you're talking blasters or bullets, the base of combat is going to be the same, unless you create some sort of technology, or you find a way of using normal technology in an interesting way. Combat's going to be roughly the same. Yes.
I have a lot to say about that, but we're talking about travel right now.
But yeah,
Like,
piracy. I imagine.
Yeah, stay on piracy for now. In the comments, if anyone wants to hear about my thoughts on how space combat in particular would be very different than how it's portrayed in the movies or even in most books, we're going to spend at least one session on that. So let's make a note. I need to talk about. I'll put it in our little sheet here. But go on, talk about piracy. I can listen and talk at the same time.
So piracy, I imagine, would be in mainly two ways. Because if we're talking about piracy, I'm assuming we're talking about more violent type of theft, not burglary, but piracy. So there'd be two types.
Yes. So, like, generally when you think of piracy, you think of the high seas. Well, now you're in space, so we're talking about ship-to-ship piracy more than on-ground piracy, which will also have an impact on this, but generally that's called robbery, or highway. Well, highwaymen were highway robbers.
Yeah, but in space, I imagine it's going to be similar to what you have in many different space-type things. The pirate ship would either be larger and would force you to land on it so that they could take stuff off of you, or they would find a way to dock with you and board, so damage you enough so that you have to either stop or be destroyed. They dock with you, they steal all your stuff. They either take your ship or they don't, but that's how it's going to work. And most of the piracy will happen along, no matter what you do, there's always going to be main highways and back roads. So from traveling from planet to planet without without a space bridge or without hyperspace, because let's be honest, there's, if you have like some sort of FT or fatal drive, we'll stick with that. If you have some sort of fatal drive to be able to take you from Earth to Mars, yes, it's going to be fast, but the ships that have that, depending upon the cost of regular fuel, if it uses a different fuel source, that's something else we could get into. If hyperspace,
I have a lot of thoughts on that.
If hyperspace uses a different fuel source than regular, rocket drive or whatever, it means that if fatal drive is more expensive to do, then it means only the larger corporations are going to do it because it makes it economical. Now, a small person who, in our own world, would be, let's say, an individual tractor-trailer truck owner, because they exist, owner-operators, they can't afford a fatal drive. But they still are going to be hired by various people to get stuff from point A to point B. Maybe non-perishables, maybe people even, because, hey, I can't afford a Fatal Drive Starliner or whatever.
Forget afford. Why would I buy uh, a 747 today, or even my own plane, when it only costs me $300 on a dirt cheap coach seat to go to where I want to go?
Right,
Round trip.
But we're talking about if for now, granted, in the real world, it's not necessarily the case, but yes, a coach seat is cheaper. But what if you can't afford a coach seat, but a guy with his two prop job who can take you where you need to go, and it's going to be cheaper, and that's all you can afford because hey, you're starting a new life on Mars, so you're gonna fly with this guy. Unfortunately, because he travels slower, he's more likely to be hit by pirates. If pirates want to hit a big ship, or they want to hit the big tractor trailers or the big star freighters, they're going to have to get them where they jump out of Fatal Drive, whether it be a jump point or hyperspace. They're going to have to hit them where roughly they come out, which is probably going to be more secure. So they're only going to hit probably bigger stuff. But the average pirate,
or on the fringes of civilization.
yes, on the fringes of civilization, yeah. But the average, but a pirate knows that hey, people travel all the time going along this road or this highway for people with a rocket drive or impulse drive, whatever you want to call it. We can hit them individually, and that's where most of the combat and stuff would be happening for
inside the solar system.
Yeah, that's how I feel it would work. Now, you don't call it piracy, you call it more robbery, but I also imagine for when it comes to like them hitting.
That's only to make a distinction between space and ground.
Gotcha. Okay, but when it comes to robbery, I imagine it's going to be more along the lines of espionage type stuff where they would try to infiltrate the companies or whatever. They're having stuff come across the space bridge so that they can kind of take it from that point. So I guess that would be more theft than robbery, or having a team so when it gets away from the security of the space bridge area, because I'm always going to assume that the space bridge area is going to be heavily monitored, guarded, what have you. So you get it as after it comes out of there, because the people guarding the space bridge are worried about the space bridge, not about Bob's trucking service that's trucking it from the space bridge to the local warehouse. And that's where you would hit them. You'd hit them after in between those points. And again, yeah.
As you said, in between planetary travel or in between solar system travel.
Right.
I like it. I like the Fatal Drive and Space Bridge. Putting the space bridges on land really changes the dynamic.
Yep.
Transformers have their own dynamics to switch around, but they're not human. They're not even remotely human.
Unless you put a remote starter in it. But,
It is a wonderful story that we're not trying to emulate here. A wonderful world to play in. We do kind of talk about it, or if we're scheduled to talk about it when we get to psionics or the Force and abilities of different species, which is down quite a ways. Certainly not tonight, but yeah. I didn't actually put up the thing here just for aliens. Do we even want aliens? So
we talked about that last time. Whether or not we'd actually want aliens in the world, because it can. That's a wonderful thing about sci-fi. Depending on where you go with your story, it can work in so many ways. You could have no aliens and everything is just colonized by humans, and we just proliferate across the galaxy. Or you can have aliens, which means that no matter what humankind tries to spread in pretty much every single sci-fi. It's just whether or not we come up against other civilizations who want to either spread or stop our spread or don't care.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I spelled. Oh, right. That's an exclamation point. Um, to really make a decision on more about FTL, what other aspects of society would FTL? Because we really need to, before we set any more rules and talk about it, we need to set a socio-political situation. And the reason why I say that is because different cultures are going to do different things. What if we had one culture that had their space bridges in space? Like, it's the same basic technology throughout the galaxies. Some people might have faster fatal drives, and some people might have slower ones. But the space bridge itself, you don't have to put it on a planet. You could create a space station to use it. You could even do from planetary to a space one, though that would create an immense vacuum when you connect the 2 points. Because I see it as a gate that opens up, connecting the 2 points in space.
Mm-hmm.
So that would create a ridiculous vacuum. So you couldn't do space to planet or vice versa, but you could do space to space or planet to planet. If there's another culture that actually has their space bridges in space, that could change a lot.
I can give you and if you wanted to set up a conflict, this is just me spitballing here. I guess this whole thing is us spitballing. But let's say that the primary, I don't know how else to put this, so you can correct me as needed, but let's say the primary energy source for space bridges is almost gravity. You need a significant amount of gravity to both start and pull out. Now that means that in most cases you're going to build on a planet. But if some culture, or because whether we're talking about alien culture or human culture, figured out the scientific knowledge to be able to, let's say, harness the gravity of a star without getting burned up, so they can get close enough to it without getting burned up, therefore they can make their jump points in space. One, they're going to be able to travel further, and two, it means that
Why are they going to be able to travel further?
They're going to be able to travel further because, depending upon how good the technology is, a star is in general, a star is going to be a larger mass, so it will have a larger amount of gravity.
So are you saying they build a gate at the star, or they use the star itself like a jump point without a gate, with no technology? Like they have a jump drive on their ship to jump from star to star.
I like that idea, but I was thinking using the star's gravity to build the gate. Let's say they came up with...
I'm with you.
Yeah, pretty much they come up with a metal coating or something like that that lets them be close to the star without fully burning up or something like that.
Or they have a series of weaker stars in their neighborhood.
But it would also...
Like, I don't know what the weakest star is. A dwarf star of some sort.
But, yeah, I'm not an astrophysicist guy. But imagine, so let's just even talk about Earth, whatever. It would create, like, if they, for some reason, if they were humans who came up with this technology, whatever the central government or central planet was, they would want that technology, and if it wasn't handed over, that would create friction and whatever, because then at that point they would be afraid of agents trying to somehow, let's say, build or bring a gate closer to our sun, and then they could pretty much blockade Earth. You can bring as much as you want through through a ground gate, but you're probably not going to be able to bring your large ships to be able to break out of there. You're going to have to depend upon all of your other places, which could create anarchy. It would be something they would be worried about. It would again, just creating another form of conflict, possibly war-wise, because technology, if you're used to doing something for 100 years and all of a sudden someone comes up with the technology to do it differently, well, that's something you never thought you might have to defend against.
Yeah, like gunpowder. When gunpowder came to Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden castles were no longer the best form of defense. Well, actually, they still were, but it changed castle warfare.
Yep.
So, for people who don't know, castle warfare in the Middle Ages was all about the siege. Castle was designed to stop, to allow you to go in and hide and be safe from the enemy as the enemy put you to siege. And the hope was you would be able to have enough food and storage and whatnot inside your, Mont and Bailey and more than that, and to hold gigantic castles where you were able to withstand longer than the people on the outside had enough supplies to wait you out. There were some big catapults that did damage to walls, but not enough damage to create an opening for them to come in. To take out a castle in medieval times, you generally had to either starve them out. You just had to starve them out. It was a siege environment. But eventually they found ways to dig under castle walls, but even then you still have defenders inside the castle. Now you just have an opportunity to get through that. Castles, by definition, are built up on higher ground, and you build a castle on low ground, you're just hurting yourself. Why would you do that? So they weren't. They were built on higher ground, and they still had their army or their defensive force inside there. You had to deal with that. But you could lay siege to a castle, and that was how medieval warfare went. The addition of gunpowder, now you could take out castle walls. Now you could do damage to people inside the castle, and it changed the way warfare went, which is what I think a real-life example of what you're talking about, changing warfare.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really, we don't want to change the technology immediately for these stories. We want to set a nice, even level of technology with some fluctuations, but a relatively evil level of technology for us to tell stories in that world.
Yeah.
So all we really decided on today was we're going to use some kind of fatal drive, warp, hyperspace, we may even hand wave it. Don't worry, Republic credits will be fine. How does that work? I don't know. I'm not a hyperspace engineer. Anyway, we'll lampshade it, hand wave it, whatever you want to call it. But we'll have one that's faster than light space travel, and then the other drive is a space bridge, generally planet to planet. Some cultures may not. Some cultures may put it in space. Maybe there's pros and cons to all of this. Having it in space makes it a whole lot faster to then just go through the portal and boom, okay, time to engage my hyperdrive and start trucking to the next planet. It would, or maybe to the next space bridge. It would also create a situation with space bridges where it's actually faster to go way out of your way to get to where you want to go.
Yep.
Like a straight line is no longer the fastest place, because if your space bridge network is set up so that you can space bridge from here, it may actually be faster if space bridges are connected to walk through 5 space bridges to get to the Alpha Proxima from Earth. The next closest star, Alpha Proxima, it may be faster to go through 5 different space bridges if there's no space bridge between Earth and Alpha Proxima, rather than taking a fatal jump there. That's something to think about. That's something to throw into the story. It's a neat little tidbit people would enjoy thinking about and puzzling. And what else can we think of? How else would this impact life and commerce? Okay. One of the reasons why fatal fuel, whatever is fueling these drives, has to be cheap, because we have 25 minutes left for our planned time. Maybe a little more than that, because we started a couple of minutes late. So right now in the world today, in America, where we're at, it is cheaper for us to take the material that we dig out of the ground or get from trees or whatever, ship it all the way, a quarter of the way around the world to China, have them manufacture it, ship it all the way back to us in America, than it is to just take that material, throw it in a factory here, and build it here, because the labor costs are so low and the transportation costs are so low. If the labor costs in China or Vietnam or whatever go up, then you need to reevaluate whether that is still economically feasible. If the price of transportation goes up, you have to reevaluate whether or not that's feasible. So, for an intragalactic, intersolar system economy to work, the price of transit has to be low enough that it is worth, economically, sending out to someone else and getting it there. The point I was driving at is that interplanetary travel has to be cheap enough to make it worth doing. Or what you're getting is so rare that it's worth paying all the extra money it'll cost to bring it to you. An example from history would be silk from China during the Roman Empire, where the Romans did have silk. Ivory from Africa. So these things were incredibly expensive, but they were very common in Rome because people were willing to pay that price. The example I used earlier about sending raw material to China to manufacture it to bring it back here is a good modern day example of very cheap transportation. Transportation has to be worth the price of whatever product you're transporting. It's not economics 101, but it is relatively basic economics, something to consider while piecing these worlds together. And it brings up the question, how do different factions, whether species factions or if it's just humans, because we haven't decided that yet, how do they trade? How does intergalactic trade from faction to faction? How does the mode of travel impact that? Because the way we're talking about it right now, us Blam Blam Truckers, they're going to be trying to get from a faction to another faction with no space bridges between them. So all of that, all the goods that they're transporting, because we trade with Russia today. One of the major factors in the whole Ukrainian-Russian war is that the oil pipelines that run through Ukraine that allow most of Russia's oil to get to Europe and then distributed around the world are controlled by the Ukraine, and they just found their own reserves. Why are they still going to be allowing their pipelines to be used by Russia if they're going to be using their own pipelines? That's a big factor. I don't know, I've never heard them talk about it on the nightly news, but that is it is an economic driver for why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they're going to lose a lot of money, and a lot of people are going to starve and die of starvation if they can't find a way to export oil, because that's their main source of revenue. And these real-life considerations are things you want to consider when world building. So, yeah, how do the factions trade with each other? Would they be willing to put up, if they were close allies, would they be willing to put up a space bridge between, say, England and France, two historical enemies? Sure, over the last 100-odd years, 120 or so, England and France have been allies, basically since the Napoleonic Wars, the late 1800s, early 1900s. But before that, in fact, during the Napoleonic Wars, they were still enemies. But after the Napoleonic Wars is when France and England really started to become allies. Would they be willing, or two nations that were that adversarial, or the Federation and the Klingons, after the whole Star Trek VI thing there with the Klingon moon blew up there that produced all their fuel? Mm-hmm. They've really integrated the two empires, the two factions together quite a bit. At that point, if they were using the technology we're proposing here, would they be willing to build one space bridge between those two factions? Could there be one faction that has space bridges to almost every other faction, one space bridge apiece, and that would be like a central economic peacemaking faction? Like Switzerland, one of the is one of the only ways to get from East Europe to West Europe is to go over the Alps. So the easy ways are to just go north of the Alps or to go south of the Alps. But if you want to go through, if there's problems from a political standpoint to go through those areas, which there has been traditionally many, many times throughout human history, your only other option is to go through Switzerland, which has always been neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So we could have a very strong trade faction known for their trade. We could have one known for their technology. If you've noticed, I really like the idea of one faction that has mastered terraforming. I mentioned that. But would they actually that's a big deal. You know, for America to now have a space bridge with Mexico, that's a big deal. That allows for a great deal more trade. And in the history of all this, whoever develops space bridge technology first would probably be very willing to sell it. Because I haven't figured out a way to use it offensively in a faction-to-faction battle yet.
And when you say space bridge, you mean the ones on the ground or just in general?
Just the technology in general. You have to get there and establish a beachhead before you can build a space bridge there. Not just a beachhead, but an actual... You have to know that area is secure, or they're going to take it from you and now use your own space bridge to go back to your place.
And that's actually one reason why, with my idea of having a faction that creates a space bridge that's able to be done using a star, that would actually make it
just quicker and easier.
Yeah, quicker and
faster.
Easier, and you can create a ship around that and just move it into place. You could literally
those bridge building ships in the Army, in the Marines, in the military.
Yeah.
So the ship's job is to go there and establish the space bridge.
Right. So it might be the biggest of the ships, but it's probably it's going to be one that needs to be protected. If a opposing force can bring one into a solar system, they immediately have reinforcements in the sky and stuff like that. And again, like I mentioned before, they could blockade planets, I won't say easily, but once that comes into place, they can blockade it easily. It also makes it so that they can expand quicker because they are traveling with the bridge fully done, and immediately, as soon as they get there, they immediately can set it up, become its own little space station, and start bringing stuff through, as opposed to having to build it like traditionally the ground ones would be done. They have the technology, but until it's on the planet, it's not able to be used, and then they have to set up power plants and all that stuff. Whereas with the ship, it's literally just has to move into place, move closer to the sun. Yeah.
Set up.
But yeah, just ideas.
We could incorporate that. That's something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It would be cheaper though, putting it on the planet, because now you can just drive your car through.
Right.
Or your truck, or whatever.
For regular trade and stuff like that, the planet makes more sense. If you're talking about expansion and conquering, the star works better.
That's really good. How long have we gone? Are we coming? I know we're coming to the end of our time.
The last one was about... part one was an hour and...
Hold on one second.
Oh, I messed up. Sorry about that. Part one was like an hour and 20 or something like that. Now we're going on 10 minutes on this. But that would mean about an hour and a half, which is a pretty decent episode.
Yeah. Do we want to keep going? Well, first up, we don't need to stop. We've done 2-hour episodes before. Well, anyway, is there more? Any other ideas you want to talk about for? Oh, I've got another one.
Go for it.
once you learn how to fold space and keep that space folded, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what a space bridge is, now you could make something like the TARDIS that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, where the
Yes.
potential is there.
Because the building itself is not necessarily the building.
Yeah, or the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have drop ships that are tiny, not much bigger than like a fighter, and it just drops, lands, and when it opens up, 500 troops come out of it, 1,000 troops,
But a lot,
a whole brigade.
but a lot of it will also depend upon the technology that requires to do it. Because, like I said, with the whole creating them in, if gravity, like with my idea, which obviously doesn't have to be used, but with my idea, if gravity is the central power for it, well, I guess you could still have. No, you would need to. The other end of the space bridge would have to be on the ground. So buildings on the ground,
In a gravity well.
yeah, like you could have a warehouse, which literally opens up from a closet in a kid's bedroom, but that'd be funny. But you're not going to be able to have a ship that can be bigger on the inside because you don't have the gravity for it. However, if we go with like a power source of some type, like just using like fusion or something like that, just an overwhelming amount of, like a good amount of power coming out, then yes, you could do stuff like that. But that also, once again, if you introduce it being able to be created and stuff like that, you create the possibility for limitless expansion by making it so that there has to be a reason for how it works. Like if it's power, you almost want it to be able to have to use an overwhelming amount of power, so that that's the reason why it has to be done on a planet or somewhat stationary for it to be able to do.
Well, it could just be where the power is readily available, not necessarily overwhelming. Example, sailing ships.
Wind. Yeah.
Yeah. Without a constant source of wind and not quite frictionless, because the sea itself adds friction, but not nearly as much as a wheeled vehicle on land. Without that wind, because there's not that much constant wind on land as there is on the sea. They've actually talked about sailing ships in the desert.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Because
you've seen it on some shows and stuff like that before too. Yeah, cartoons generally, but yeah. But I was also just thinking, if you're talking about just having a constant source of power,
a gravity well makes a lot of sense, but where are you going with this?
gravity well makes sense. But let's say, again, I'm just talking like, keeping with my idea or whatever, without having the ability to move close to a star to be able to have its gravity be equivalent or greater, because the farther out you are, the less gravity has an effect. So creating technology, for like shielding on it, so that's how they do it. You could also do. They developed a way to use solar power to create it, and of course that would be great.
Or 0 point energy, but no solar power.
Yeah.
Because we want to restrict it.
Yes, pretty much something. Yeah, something to make
Cosmic rays generated by the sun, as opposed to just.
And that way they can still do it from. They don't have to necessarily even be close to a sun. They just have to have a sun in ready view, so that they can put up whatever sort of collectors or whatever it is, and then start doing
Like the Tachyon ship in Deep Space Nine.
It's been a while.
Remember when they flew the non-warp ship that the Bajorians claimed to have created?
Oh, the one that Jake and Sisko.
Yeah, the sailing episode with Jake and Sisko.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they created energy sails,
Mm-hmm.
and Count Dooku actually flies something similar to this.
Yep, I was thinking about that.
Episode 2 of Star Wars. But they create a sail, and that sail picks up photons, and adding those photons to it adds to the propulsion of the ship. And then when it picked up tachyons, it actually put them through warp. Tachyons don't exist.
That was actually one of the more. That was one of the more wholesome episodes of Deep Space Nine, because he was going from Bajor to Cardassia, and even when they got to Cardassia, like everyone's like, even the Cardassians are celebrating. Hey, you did this historic achievement. It was great.
Yeah, they weren't willing to admit it until he got there, and luckily the Federation was at a relative period of peace with Cardassia at that point.
Right, because it was before the Dominion War.
It's always hard keeping up with the Cardassians.
Reminds me of a Big Bang Theory episode.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I really did think when somebody was talking, I was at work, and somebody was talking about this many, many years ago, keeping up with the Kardashians.
Still do it.
Like, they made a new Star Trek episode, a new Star Trek series?
Oh.
That's weird. I mean, I know they go in different directions, because Deep Space Nine is very different thematically than The Next Generation. Voyager is, well, Voyager.
But hey,
even than the rest of...
But I was going to say, even Strange New Worlds is far different thematically than Discovery. And Lower Decks is different than everything, except for Rick and Morty.
That's their attempt to make Rick and Morty in the Star Trek universe.
Although, I have to say, I had a lot of fun with the crossover episode.
Don't tell me, I haven't watched it.
I thought you weren't watching it, so...
I'm not, and I don't really want to know.
Oh, it was just a crossover episodes between Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. That was a time travel.
Yeah, it would have to be.
But it was fun. Like I said, and as we've talked about before, we all enjoy different things, and that's okay. That's one of the reasons for this podcast. We're looking for the positivity between, the positivity in geekdom. Not everybody is going to enjoy these same things, and that's fine.
Yeah. So the beard will probably be gone the next time you guys see me, which is probably why I've been playing with it as much as I have. Plus, it's something to do when I'm bored. When I'm GMing, I do this a lot.
I am lazy, so the beard will probably not be gone. If I wasn't lazy, it probably would be. Although, I look better with it. I'm not saying I look better than Bees. I just look better than myself.
To each their Dulcinea. To every man his dream.
I got my little white hairs poking through. It's all good.
These big streaks here, they used to be red. I miss the red. And I mean, like, last year. This is the last time I grew it out. This is weird.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah, I think we've
anything else you want to say about this before we call it? Before we sign off?
I think we're good. Yeah, we kind of started to go on. When we start talking about our beards, it's probably time for a night. But thank you, everyone, for joining us on another episode of the Beas and Buse podcast, or the Beas and Buse, or...
We got to come up with a better name. We should probably call it... I came up with this for something I want to do with my sister, but she's not interested in doing a podcast anymore. We could call it The Greatest Podcast Ever! I think we may have done this on this before.
We talked about it, and then we looked it up, and I think Kevin Smith has that.
No, he's got... it was something about geeking out or something.
Oh, right.
Geeking Out with Kevin Smith, who has made a lot more geeky stuff than I have, but his whole He-Man thing with him really soured him to the fandoms.
Yeah. I can enjoy it without... Never mind. Let's just say...
It is what it is. The guy's doing what he thinks is best for him, obviously, and I wish him luck.
I heard it was getting us another season, but I could be wrong.
If it's making Netflix money, it probably will. Like, That was the announcement David Zaslav, not David Zaslav. James Gunn needed to make for the DC universe. One of the reasons why nobody's going to see these DC films is because the current ones, Blue Beetle and Shazam 2 and Black Adam was really the start of it. But once James Gunn took over, he was like, they didn't come out and directly say we're completely done with these characters forever, but that is basically the message they got. Mm-hmm. And the message they really needed to put out, if you're listening, David Zaslav, was we're here to make money. We're a company. We're a business. We want to make money. We make money by telling stories you love. As long as you love the stories, we're going to keep telling them. And you tell us that you love these stories by coming and seeing these stories and paying to see them and buying the DVDs and renting them on video on demand and whatnot. So if you come to the theaters and keep watching the current DCEU, we'll keep making DCEU movies. If you don't, then that's a signal that you're not interested anymore, and we're going to move on to something else.
Because keep in mind, Blue Beetle was in production and announced before James Gunn took over. Blue Beetle would have fit in the old DCU. So
yeah, I didn't see it.
Neither did I. But it would have fit in there beforehand. Just like So
as much as I would love to make movies for create my own movies for the DCU, and I think they've got a brilliant catalog. And I would. It's not, the current stuff just doesn't, it's not written for me. It's not written for people who like the same stuff I like, and I've watched enough of it to know it's not written for me. I watched Shazam 2 when I went to go see that, and it's fine. I'm not going to say it was an awful movie, because it wasn't awful, but it was not the kind of storytelling that I like.
I'm
not the intended audience.
I binge watched Miss Marvel. I actually didn't think it was a bad show. I actually think it was thought it was a solid show, a good show. It is just not a show I overly enjoyed because it felt like it was intended for a different audience. That audience, I felt, was a audience of younger people. If I was a teenager in probably grade school or middle school, I would have enjoyed Miss Marvel a lot more. Because although the story of Miss Marvel in that show, I'm not talking about in general, so, don't at me in the comments, but if Spider-Man and Miss Marvel, in terms of how that show went, and I haven't read Miss Marvel comic books, so I don't know how she is normally outside of the cartoons and stuff that I've seen with her in it, they're all young kids getting powers, getting used to their powers, overcoming, origin story-wise, overcoming some sort of great obstacle, what have you. However, Spider-Man, even as an adult, because hey, I saw the Tom Holland movies as an adult, Spider-Man speaks to me in a way that Miss Marvel doesn't. Maybe it's because I'm someone who has more interest in science, and that's something more like Peter Parker. Maybe it's just a nostalgia lens because, hey, still, whether or not it's a new movie or not, Peter Parker and Peter Parker Spider-Man has been a favorite character of mine since I was a kid. But at the same point in time, Miles Morales Spider-Man is also a new thing, and yeah, he's got the Spider-Man name, but he is a different character. But hey, when I watched Into the Spider-Verse, haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse yet, but when I watched Into the Spider-Verse, he still hit me. And not just because I am a black guy. There's just something about that character that resonated. From people who have read the comics, they've told me I may not enjoy the comics like I did that movie because the character is somewhat different in their portrayal. Different stories will grab different people. Some have a wider mass appeal, some have a more niche appeal, and again, that's okay. But when it comes to movies, like Beas said, they need to make money. Because regardless of what was said, if half the people in America bought a ticket to go see Justice League when it came out, or to go see Shazam 2 when it came out, I don't care if it was announced that it was ended. That that probably would have been like, all right, look, James, I know we said you could restart over, but hey, Zachary Levi just made us a ton of money. People are going to want to continue to see this, even though we said it's not coming any further. So, make it work. That's what realistically would have happened. Because...
Or they'd set up a second universe, which is what they've already done twice. Because the Joker movie and the Batman movie that just came out in the last couple of years,
completely different.
Neither one of them were set in the DCEU.
Nope, they were set in the... Because now everything's in the multiverse. Which, okay.
DC hasn't created a multiverse yet for their movies.
Yes, they did.
Oh, where? Blue Beetle? The Snyder Cut?
Arrowverse.
Oh, right.
Arrowverse established the multiverse and linked the DCU.
Yep, because Flash came in. I remember that.
And they have actually talked about, in previous articles, hey, stuff's subject to change, but they have talked about in interviews and stuff before that Pattinson Batman is just on a different Earth, different world than, Affleck Batman. And that's...
Affleck.
And while I haven't seen Flash, I've got HBO Max, I'll probably watch it at some point. While I haven't seen Flash, it is, again, well, hey, I mean, he actually traveled to the Arrowverse, so whatever. But...
Yeah, that's a multiverse.
The Flash set up multiverse. Yeah,
they have set up... I apologize, I was wrong.
It's okay. You didn't watch the movies, and you didn't really watch Arrowverse after a bit.
Their previews have not enticed me to that point.
Nope.
So, Mr. Zaslav, if you're watching this, which I kind of doubt you are, but boy, wouldn't it be great. If you want to hear a pitch on how to do a DC Universe, Bees presents the DC Universe. I've got a whole world that would appeal to people like me, your old audience. So, a whole pitch set up for that. And, yeah. Us Blam Blam. Well, that's what we should call the podcast, is Blam Blam Truckers.
I like it. Except for the fact people might turn it on expecting us to be, tractor-trailer drivers. But I like it, though. So, anyways, we've made a couple of jokes about this. Blam Blam Truckers is just a...
It is a nonsense phrase.
It is a nonsense phrase that I use as a catchphrase for a character in an online role-playing game. Yeah. But
it is the most non sequitur ever. Blam Blam Truckers! It appeals to my comedic sense of the absurd.
Yep. Oh, all right. Well, everybody, we will join you again when we join you again.
Say good night, Gracie.
Probably next week for you. May or may not be next week for us, but good night all. Thank you for watching.
Good night.